And welcome to this episode of Communications and Cigars. I'm your host, John Crook. Thank you for tuning in tonight. It's always greatly appreciated on there. And we kind of have, tonight's show is going to kind of be part two. We talked last week about P25. And got a lot of people that said, hey, great introduction video and stuff like that. But can, like you did with DMR, you kind of did demystifying DMR. Then you went into programming DMR. Can you show us a little snippet about programming P25? And I said, you know what? Okay, that's fine. That's not a problem. I will go ahead and do that. So that's what tonight's episode is going to be about. And it is titled Programming P25. So, so that's what we're going to be all about tonight. But before we get to the show, I want to go ahead and thank everybody that always tunes into our show and everything like that on there. We are Communications and Cigars, where we started out talking about communications while enjoying a cigar. We kind of started streaming on Facebook, social media, and everybody said, you know what, John? You need to go ahead and you need to jump into this, and you need to go ahead and say you do this on a more regular basis. And that's where we went along and we said, okay, let's go ahead and do it on a weekly show. But that's what we're first going to talk about. So put in the comments, if you will, we're going to do a little bit of a survey. Now, one of the things about the show is that I like doing the show. I really, truly do. And I'll actually get to it, how you could also submit if you don't want to submit into the comments here. But long story short is I do enjoy doing the show. It is not my main livelihood. I don't make money off the show. We are sponsored by JJK Communications. We'll get to the email and them in just a moment here. But with stuff that I've given away for free on the show here, the little kind of cool things, like we gave away some t-shirts, we gave away our, really bends my antenna, little keychains and stuff like that on there. The show isn't done for money. It's done for fun, okay? I don't have a Patreon, as some people say I should get. I don't have a subscribing where people can pay for me and anything like that whatsoever. It's just done for more of an educational purpose, okay? I have other things in my life that can make me money. I feel the show is fun. Why do I say all that? Well, sometimes we kind of started out the show doing Mondays, 8 p.m. Central Time, because that seemed to just kind of sort of work with everything. But I've had a lot of people say, John, I can't tune into the show live, or I always have to catch up on the replay, or this or this or this or this. So the question I'll put out to you guys and gals that subscribe to the channel, that like the information on there, and you have two options put in there. Continue the shows at Monday at 8 p.m. Understanding, of course, some are going to be recorded and some are going to be live. Like this one here is actually recorded tonight. Or at least release a show once a week. It doesn't have to be Monday, but release a show when you can. So if still can do it once a week, but maybe it might be we release a show on a Monday one time, and then the next time we might release a show on a Wednesday, and the next time might be a Friday, and so that kind of thing. So I want to hear what you, as the viewers, the ones that tune in, the ones that reply back and everything like that, and get the good information, and I get good comments and feedbacks. Do you want the show still Mondays at 8 p.m., or do we go ahead and kind of release the show once a week? And maybe I'll try to release it at the beginning of the week, like a Monday or Tuesday, that kind of thing. So send in your votes. Now, where can you send in your votes? So obviously you can do it in the comment section. If you are subscribed to the YouTube channel here that you're watching on, you can go ahead and comment on there. Go ahead in there, comment and saying, basically saying Monday nights at 8 p.m. or a recorded show once a week. That's fine. It's up to you. If you don't want to leave the comments on here, because some people do and some people don't, you can go over to our Facebook page, Communications and Cigars, and you can click on the poll that is there. Or if you want to, you can go ahead and you can email me. email me at communications-cigars@jjkcom.com. Once again, communications-cigars@jjkcom.com. JJK Communications is a sponsor of the show, and they sponsor it by providing us the equipment, providing us with all the stuff that we talked about, and that's kind of what keeps the show alive. Like I said, I've had people that have said, "Hey, John, have people come in, we'll give you some money, that kind of thing." Nah. If I was to do that, I think it would be more towards, which I've kind of worked on a little bit, would be more towards a scholarship for technology, is that kind of thing on there. So we just like to do the show for fun, that kind of thing. So put it in your comments, send an email, communications-cigars@jjkcom.com, or go ahead to our Facebook page, Communications and Cigars, and then go ahead and submit the poll on there. And hey, if you vote on all three, that's fine. You vote all three, right? It's not going to be a problem whatsoever. But let's get back to what tonight is about. Tonight, we're going to go over programming P25. Now, couple things I want to go ahead and stress. The software I'm going to be using tonight is not the same for this. It happens to be E.F. Johnson software because I have E.F. Johnson. I had an E.F. Johnson radio right next to me here the other day. But I like the E.F. Johnson radios. I purchased their software. I'm going to tell you this. The software here is purchased. It is a legal copy. It is not an illegal copy. To keep the integrity, to keep the world in a proper place, don't buy bootlegged software. Don't have it downloaded. Don't do anything like that whatsoever. Yes, software can be expensive. That is a responsibility, or that is the, quote, price to pay, no pun intended, for going ahead and having technologies like this. DMR was a little different. If you're using higher tier commercial radios, DMR software is going to go ahead and cost you. Motorola is going to charge you for it, right? Hytera is probably going to charge you for it. Kenwood's going to charge you for it. All those kind of things like that on there. So just keep that in mind. Now, there are cheaper Chinese versions of stuff that have free software or that kind of thing. Same thing with this, though, here to a degree. There's not a really lot of cheap P25 or aftermarket or Chinese P25 radios. You're usually paying brand name for this stuff. So there are Motorola, there are E.F. Johnson, there is Kenwood, there is Tate, there are all those things. Get the software and do it correctly. Because one, usually when you buy the software, you're going to get the firmware updates. These radios are computers, okay? So definitely do that on there. I just want to put that out there because there's so many different things that people have out there. They buy they get the it's just, I don't know. It's just, don't do that. Don't be that guy. Don't be that girl. Okay. They're so on there. But once again, we're going to talk about P25 and programming. We're going to kind of cover some of the things that we talked about last week, but we're going to kind of escalate it on there. So kind of take it to the next level. So without further ado, let's jump over to our beautiful software page here. So what you're seeing on our software page here is, in this case here, is you're actually seeing the actual software on my screen. I have it adjusted on the screen here, so you're going to be able to see all the stuff over here. And I'm going to be moving my mouse around up here, so we're going to be looking at a couple things on here. Now, once again, the software is E.F. Johnson based. A lot of the software is just different GUIs, so graphic user interfaces. They do the same thing in different ways, okay? So some may have it laid out here, some may have it, some have zones and systems and personalities and this and this and this and this. I want everybody to bear with me on that, okay? Because I can go ahead and I could show you E.F. Johnson software, Kenwood software, Motorola software, and guess what? They're all different styles of how they have it set up, but in the end, what's going to happen when you push that button is going to transmit in P25 when you have it all set up on there. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into designing or working with P25 programming. Now, the first thing that we need to do here, and all this kind of stuff here, is first of all, we need to kind of go over here to the global radio here and everything like that. So like if you have a radio ID and stuff like that, you need to go ahead and do that. Consider that in your mind and everything like that on there. But what you want to do in this case here is you want to set up and understand a few things, which is really going to come into this zone here. Now, this is where we're going to spend the majority of the time. But first of all, what you need to do is you need to make sure that you have A, the right frequency, B, the NAC code, and C, or number 3, the talk group. Those are the requirements to do P25. If you don't have those, it's not going to go ahead and work correctly on there. So what we're going to do is we're going to work in reverse though. Okay, so instead of having the frequency, the NAC code, and the talk group, we're going to want to work on the talk group first. Now, before we dive right into this, we're going to go ahead and say, a lot of people are saying, well, John, what are those things again? I remember talk group from DMR, but what is the NAC code? What is the obviously know what frequency is. Okay. So if we go back to our from last week's episode, right? We have our frequencies here, okay? That's obviously, we have the transmit frequency here. We have the receive frequency up here. That's great. That's dandy. We need that information. The NAC code, network access code, is a code that you need in order to access the repeater or the other radio. Now, the easiest way to describe it, it's like a PL tone. So when you have an FM radio, you have a PL tone, right? So if I don't have the right PL tone in my radio, when I transmit, your radio is going to ignore it. So if you need a PL tone of 100 hertz, okay, or let's say a DPL tone of 156, if my radio isn't transmitting 100 hertz, if it isn't transmitting a DPL of 156, your radio is going to ignore it, okay? I need to have the right PL or DPL code in order to be able to make your receiver wake up to listen, saying, oh, okay, here, that's fine, and everything like that, okay? PL, by the way, remember, stands for privacy line, and DPL stands for digital privacy line. Doesn't mean that it's encrypted or anything like that. What it meant was, and Motorola used that term, is because it basically said, I'm here just listening only to my stuff. I'm not listening to everybody else's frequency or conversation on there. Now, why would that come into play? Well, back in the days, there used to be a lot of people that shared frequencies on there, okay? Even business today, even business frequencies like that I have. There's itinerant frequencies and stuff. Well, if I have a separate PL or DPL code in my radio, it's only going to open up for the other people that are transmitting with that. Okay, now let's come full circle again. So we need to worry about the frequency and the NAC code. But once again, we're going to work in reverse. So now we need to figure out what the talk group is, okay? Now I'm going to go here under the systems here, and this is my main one. I'm going to go under the talk group list here. Now, what is a talk group? Well, that's a good question. What is a talk group? John, you said the NAC code was like a PL. Was it the talk group like a PL tone also? Not really, okay? What a talk group is that it is a sub part of the channel, okay? And what I mean by sub part of the channel is that we have our normal frequency, and that is, of course, quote, quote, the channel. And that's going to go ahead and have that communication take place. Well, FM is all analog, so there's no way to kind of break things down on there. Yeah, you could use PL tones and stuff like that on there. You could, yes. But what digital does is digital allows you to have the talk groups, which is the groups of people you want to talk to. So for an example, in a talk group situation, you might have a police department, fire department, ambulance, public works, utilities, business. I use P25 for business. You may have them share one frequency. And that talk group really is going to say, okay, there's something on the frequency. It is a P25 signal. It matches my NAC code. But then, am I needing to listen to it? Now, the NAC code is really a network access code. And the reason that is because when it comes to repeaters and systems and stuff like that, that is kind of sort of the key to open up the system. Talk groups are basically the people of groups, like I said, who want to talk together. Now, I restated that. You just said that a minute ago. I want to stress that on there because some people get confused about talk groups. Now, talk groups can also be used for routing, okay? Thinking, if you are familiar with DMR, folks, you have a certain talk group, and that may go down the DMR system and stuff that you want to go down on there, and kind of proceed from that point on there. That's fine. That's kind of what a talk group does, even in P25. So for an example here, let's say talk group number 1 is going to be, and we're going to call this, so we could change the name here. So I open it up here. It's a conventional talk group. Whether it's conventional, whether it's trunking, whatever, a talk group is a talk group and what it does here. So let's say our normal police department uses talk group 1, and we're going to call this main. Okay. Now what that means is I'm just throwing a name into that talk group. So I might say main TG for talk group. Alrighty. Now what that tells me here is that is going to be the main talk group. So when I need to talk to dispatch, I want to talk to whatever, we're going to use that. Now I'm going to add another one here. And let's say, for an example, I'm a supervisor on an ambulance service. And let's say when there is time in their situation, as a supervisor, I need to be able to talk to other supervisors on the repeater. I may need to be contacted by dispatch, or I might be in a meeting or something like that, and I want to have my radio on, but I don't need the blaring traffic going over and over and over again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this supervisor. Yeah, we'll call it supervisor. I was going to put supervisor TG, but there's not enough room. So supervisor on there. So now what in essence I just did is I created 2 talk groups. So I have the main, which is like what dispatch would talk to the field units on, okay? And then I have supervisor. Now supervisor is what dispatch would call the supervisors on. Now, unlike DMR, you don't have time slots, right? DMR had time slots where you can go ahead and have, 2 conversations at one time on a repeater. That doesn't happen with P25. What happens with P25 is you can only have 1 conversation at a time. But in this case, if we need to, the dispatcher can then go ahead and switch talk groups to be able to talk amongst themselves. So if you're familiar with the concept of a community repeater, okay, where you have multiple users on there, and when I say multiple users, I mean maybe like multiple companies. And then what happens is that company A or group A doesn't need to talk to group B. We used to do that with PL tone. Well, now in P25, we use talk groups. Now, what is the significance of the talk group? So once we've made our talk groups here, and that's what you really got to kind of sort of carve out first. You got to understand the talk groups, and I'll show you why in a minute. But now here's what it is. We have talk group 1 is going to be main, and talk group 2 is going to be supervisor. Now, in the commercial world, I want to stress in the commercial world, because I brought this up with DMR and people are like, you can't talk about encryption and da-da-da-da-da. Well, we're not. But in this case here, what it is that you see, you can go ahead and you can select encryption on here. If you're using the hammy world, you got to select clear, folks. Can't be using encryption. So now I have my 2 talk groups here. And here's the cool part about talk groups. You can create any sort of talk group that you sort of really kind of want to go ahead and have on there, okay? There are amazing amount of talk groups that you can have. Like, so if I want talk group 999, I can do talk group 999, okay? I could do whatever I want to go ahead and do on there. So that's the advantage of going ahead and having that ability with it. But right now, we're only going to do these 2 talk groups. That's what we're going to do. So talk group 1, talk group 2. And let's say here, let's say I have an emergency talk group. I'm going to go ahead and create this one, 911. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put this as emerge TG. So that means emergency talk group, okay? So I'm going to just create those 3 talk groups on there, alrighty? So now let's go over to the zone, okay? Now what we have to do is once you have your talk group selected in here, now you need to start applying them to the different channels. And what I mean by applying them to the different channels is I mean just that, applying them to the channels. It's going to go ahead and say like, hey, here's the deal. I need this channel, this frequency, and this kind of thing here. So for our starting here on our software, we're going to start out with channel 1 here. And we're going to be calling this one the good old classic dispatch. Alrighty. And now what's going to happen with this channel in this case is this is going to be our main dispatch channel. And what we're going to do right away is we're going to skip over this part. Well, we'll hit the talk group part here. We could do that right now. So we just set that up, but notice how we set it up, and there are the different talk groups we can select from. Because now as we start to program a P25 radio, now we have the talk groups made, right? Now we have to take the frequency and then take the color, or take, excuse me, not the color code, but the NAC code, and mix them with the talk group to be able to go ahead and do that. So let's call this dispatch, and it's going to be our main talk group. Now, on some types of talk groups and stuff like that, you have different options here. So you can list a select here, and it could say strap to selected group, list selectable. So in certain radios, depending on how you want to have it set up, if you're setting it up for like the hammy world, okay, you may have it set up that you could just be on this one frequency and go from there. We'll show you a ham setup in a minute, okay? We'll do that then, okay? So I'm going to have it selected here, selected to strap to selected group, meaning this talk group is always going to be on what I'm going to program here. Now, this emergency group ID, okay? Lots of radios have an emergency button. What that emergency button does is when you push it, it's like beep, 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 beep. It sends out these alarms over the whole system so that someone knows that, oh my God, I'm in trouble. I can't talk on the radio. I need help, whatever. On commercial radios, you see it's a little orange button either on the top of the radio or like on the front of the controller of the control head of the radio. Now, if you have that set up, then that's where you would select it. Now, none means that it's going to go an emergency right over the main talk group you have, or you could select the different talk groups. Some systems in some places have an emergency talk group. Where I was at a dispatcher, we had an emergency talk group. That emergency talk group was one that anytime the alarm button was pushed, what it did is it moved them off of the main channel, the main talk group, okay, and threw them to a different channel, different talk group. And the reason being is that when we do that, we can have a direct communication with them, okay? So think of it this way. If this person pushes emergency button, and this is the main talk group, and they're getting beaten, they're getting hit and stuff like that, emergency buttons can sometimes open up their radios so that they can go ahead and you could hear what they're saying and stuff like that on there. You don't want everybody responding to it, be like, we're going to this, hey, copy this and stuff like that, I'm en route, because you're trying to walk over that person that's in help, that's in need, okay? So that's what that is for there. So now, next comes into it is the general operation of things. Okay, so do we want high power, low power switch? We got to do that. And then timeout timer. I can't stress enough the usage of timeout timer. I just can't. I really can't. I set all my radios to timeout timers of 90 seconds. Now what this is this is an alert. As you get closer to your timeout timer, it's going to go ahead and alert you, okay? So you can select that on or off on there. Modulation, as you see, I'm modulated on there, so I'm not in a hammy frequency. I'm in a hammy frequency, see, and even there, this radio is locked to narrow band on there, okay? So let's not argue about that or anything like that. But let's say, for example, our dispatch transmits. So I'm going to transmit into the dispatch station. Let's say, just argument's sake, it's 155 or 158.000. Great, grand, cool, nifty, neat, wow. That's my transmit frequency. Now, this is where this next part here is going to get a little difficult for people. And this is where we come into our NAC codes. Now, network access code is what we've talked about. But you have to understand, the P25 common one is a hexadecimal one. So if you're reading it on a piece of paper or something like that, you usually write it in the hexadecimal form. Now, as you see on this radio here, it gives you both. It gives you the hexadecimal or the decimal form. So if I was at 293, okay, then that's hexadecimal, and that translates to 659. If you remember, the 293 is kind of the common NAC code used. But let's say I wanted to go to that open one, that F7E, okay? Whoop, sorry. Let's go to let's try one. Let's say code 100. Well, if I go to code 100, look, the decimal is 256. It is the equivalent that is on there. Okay. There are some on there, like some people go FFE. That is one of them. There's a couple different ones that are on there, but you do have to have something in there. You can't really have 0 because 0 is technically a NAC code. It's not, because you can even go 1. If you want to have a NAC code of 1, you can go 1, okay? If you want to have a NAC code of 10, it'd be 10, but it's not really 10 in decimal, it's there. So if I want to, I can have a NAC code of A, okay? whatever you want to do, however you want to do it, okay? If you want to go to NAC code of FFFF, you can do that on there too. That's kind of like the open code to a degree on there, okay? But for this one, we're just going to go ahead and say it's, let's call it 100, just argument's sake. 100 hexadecimal, but 256 decimal. All right. So now we have that set up for a transmit. We know we're going to transmit on 158.000, and we're going to have this NAC code here of 100. That is what I'm transmitting on. Now we're going to go up here and let's just say our receive frequency is 154.500. Okay. Now, same thing. I put in my receive frequency. Now I have to put in my NAC code. Now, this is where NAC codes can vary. NAC codes could be the same as your transmit versus receive. It could be separate depending on what system you're going into. So let's say since this is the main dispatch channel, we're going to use 100 once again. Okay. Now, as I said, there is no CSQ, right? For PL tones, right, you can have it turned off, right? You can have CSQ, carrier squelch. Or if you turn it on, you have to select a tone. The average tone is 67 hertz to about 250.3 hertz. There are some different varied miscellaneous whatever. There's a few that are non-standard ones, as they call it. There's 38 EIA standard CTCSS tones. Some radios have the full 50 tones in there. That's another episode in and of itself. But the reason I bring this up is because if you don't have the right NAC code for receive or something like that, you may not hear something. If you're not sure of the receive NAC code, this is where this little checkbox here, it says digital squelch. You can click or unclick it. And what that does when I click it is if I click it and check marks in it, it's going to ignore. Even though this is programmed in here, it's just going to be like, forget it. I'm not going to listen to you as a NAC code. It's going to receive any and everything underneath the sun. Okay? It's going to ignore the NAC codes. So if you had multiple users on this frequency and your group was listening to NAC code 100, but then there was another user NAC code of 293, guess what? I would receive the traffic for 100 as well as 293. So now here's what I have here all set up. So I have my channel name. I have my main talk group that's going to be used. I have high power. It's going to be 158.000 for transmit. Hexadecimal NAC code is 100. And then it's going to go ahead and I'm going to turn the digital squelch off. So it's only going to open up to 100. And that's it, folks. That's it for programming a P25 channel. Super simple. It really is super simple. Okay. But I said programming a channel. We need to have an ID. And that's going to be our next part. We're going to go over to the system tab here. Now, this is a big debate. This is the same things that DMR falls into. This is the same things that NextEn falls into. I feel it was kind of stupid the way that they went along and that they initiated this numbering sequence. Whatever. But you have to have an ID in your radio. Now, IDs can be as simple as the number 1. IDs can be as part of, what's that ID registration that, we're supposed to use for ham, like mine is 3155155. Okay, I don't know how they came up with that on there. It doesn't make sense to me. I think there was better, more efficient ways on there. But you have to have an ID in there. Now, if you're obviously doing this for public safety, for EMS or fire, if you're allowed to program, you know that there's going to be a numbering sequence. You know that there's going to be a numbering plan. You have to follow that plan. Because with P25, systems can be locked down. DMR also too and stuff like that. But systems can be locked down with IDs to saying, no, if this ID doesn't match, it's not going to access the system. It's not going to be useful. It's not going to be valid. Okay? So you have to make sure that your ID is programmed correctly. Now, in that, as you see, my type is main here. So when I go back over to the zone, I'm going to go into edit zone. That's where you got to see here, like I could pull a bunch of different ones here. Okay. I'm going to be doing main. So I need to use that main profile on there. Okay, because if I have another selected profile on there, let me close this up here. And this is a really big one where people do this. So let's say my ham profile or my main profile, let's say I'm badge 380. Okay. So now when I'm badge 380, let me clear these out here. My MDC ID too, let's see I have. Okay. Let's say my badge is 380. Now when I build the system here, as I look up to my screen, as I build my system here, I go here, I look at the zone. So let's say here I'm in my main zone. Guess what? I need to make sure I'm in that, because if I go down here and let's say I'm going to program this for my amateur hotspot or the repeater, maybe I need to go to my ham TAC ID, which is this one here. So it's important that the ID is associated with the proper channel sequence on there. If it's not, you're going to have IDs. You may not get access to the system, that kind of thing like that on there. So we're going to change this back here, and we're going to go through and kind of show you a few more little programming things. So this was our main dispatch channel that we talked about. Now let's say we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk, and we're going to be on our supervisor channel. So we're going to call it supervisor CH. Well, here, let's do this. Let's do SUP supervisor like that on there. Okay. And then with that, we're going to go ahead and do that. And then we're going to put CH just to make it nice and neat and everything on there. So now here's what we have going on here. So we are once again digital, but this time, remember the talk group thing? Here, this time I'm going to go ahead and I got to switch it down to supervisor, because I'm calling it the supervisor channel. Now it's going to be high power again here. Okay. Don't worry about that. Remember our transmit was going to be 158.0000. And then remember, our tone was going to be 100 on this one. And our receive was going to be 154.500 from before. And this time, I'm going to just click digital squelch. Because this time, as a supervisor, I may want to see if anybody else is using these channels, right? Whatever the case may be. But now what's going to happen is this. So we have this list built here, right? So now here's my day-to-day channel, the dispatch channel. They're using talk group 1. If I go over here now and I'm on channel 2, which is a supervisor talk group, I may see the light on my radio light up like it's receiving a signal, but I'm going to hear nothing. I'm going to hear nothing at all because it's not the right talk group. Okay? It's not the right talk group whatsoever. Okay? Now, this is an example of once again, hard coding a talk group with the frequency and with the NAC code. Let's say, and I'm going to edit my zone. I'm going to actually add 2 more channels here. So in this one, I just come into the zone here. I'm going to click OK. Now I have more channels here. So I have the supervisor channel. But now what I'm going to go ahead and do is, let's say we have a different dispatch channel. Let's say I have a dispatch south channel. Okay, so the main dispatch channel takes care of most of the areas, but I have a dispatch south. Okay. Now, here's a cool thing about it on it, right? When I do this here, I got to go back into my zone here real quick. I'm going to go here. I got to switch it to P25. I didn't switch to P25. See down here, you can select analog or P25. Okay. And if you notice, it's always hard-coded because P25 is always narrow. So I'm going to do dispatch south. And what dispatch south basically is going and saying is like, okay, we're going into another repeater. Okay. Might be the same frequency repeater, might be a different frequency setup, whatever the case may be. But in this one, what it is, it happens to be the same input, 158.000, and it's going to be a NAC code this time of 200 for there. So it's going to be main still because I need to talk to dispatch on there. But as you notice, I'm going to go in on 158.000, but I'm going in on NAC code 200. Still going to be 154.500 in our little make-believe here. And it's still going to be a NAC code of 100. So if we see up here, we have dispatch, which is 158.000, NAC code of 100, 154.500, NAC code of 100, talk group 1. This case here, I'm 158.000, NAC input of 200, and then here's 154.500, NAC of 100, same talk group because I'm going to talk on the main. So what I just did with that NAC code is that, once again, think of it this way. There's a repeater over here. There's a repeater over here. This one repeater covers a huge area, but this one is like right because it's like a small little area of the city, the village, the county, wherever, and I can't get out of it. Now, what may happen is that this might be a remote sieve site. This might be something you have to do, whatever the case may be. This can go ahead and take place and take happening, okay? But that is how you create a split system. Now, here's the other one that we wanted to talk about. So here's what we're going to do is we're going to change this. We're going to call it multi-channel. Now, whoa, wait a minute here, John. What the hell are you talking about? Multi-channel. So you have multiple channels? Yeah, or what better yet, instead of channel, let's call it multi-talk group. So now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select the primary talk group, which is going to be main. But now if you notice, I'm going to do list selectable. Now what that's going to allow me to do in this case is it's going to allow me to say, hey, when you're on this, I can manually select which talk group I want to go ahead and use. So maybe when I'm on this channel, I could select that I'm going to be on supervisor. And instead, when I go back, I want to be on, maybe then later after I'm done doing supervisor stuff, okay, I've got to go back to the main. Or I'm going to go to that 911, whatever you want it to be, A lot of people will do this because what it really does is that it takes up less channels in your radio. So if you're limited on space and channels in radio, or you're having confusion, or like, wait a minute. I'm on channel 4, but I heard I'm on channel 4, this kind of thing like that, whatever. Some may do that. This definitely does come down into radio training and radio discipline. 9 times out of 10, people will just go ahead and mock these channels or repeat these channels. And so 1 is dispatch, 2 is dispatch south, 3 is supervisor, 4 is 911. Those kind of things like that, whatever the case may be. Some people don't, okay? It's really up to the end user on there. But in this case, once again, we're going to it's going to be 158.000. Now, the NAC code, I can't switch NAC code. I'm only switching to talk group. I'm only switching to the people that I talk to on here. So I'm going to put it as 100 again. Going to come up here, 154.500, and I'm going to be 100 again. So what I'm having here in this case is that I may have it, and I'm going to change the name because I don't like multi-talk group. I'm going to put multi-dispatch, okay? So now I know that, hey, on this channel in my radio, I can go ahead and I can select the different talk groups on there, okay? Now, how would we do that? What advantage would that be in different things? Well, let's say, and let's go back over here to our system. Whoops, sorry here. Let's go back over to our system here. And let's say I'm going to go up to my Hammy talk group here, okay? And I'm going to open that up. And then let's say on my ham talk group, I have talk group 1, and I'm just going to call that TG1. And then I have talk group 300, because that's what they have in the system. So I'll call this regional, let's say. And then let's say they had talk group 1000. And that was maybe statewide. Whatever. We're just making some things up to do that. I'm going to click OK. Now you notice it's on my ham profile. So now I'm going to go back up to here. I'm going to go to my zone. Now I'm going to edit a zone. And I'm going to add them at, we'll just add them 5 and 6. But notice something here. I need to make sure that they're set for the right ones. Because if I don't have that set up for the right personality, watch what happens. Okay, I'm going to put in my hammy frequencies. Whoop, I forgot to make them P25 again. We got the P25, P25, click there. So now I'm going to go to my hammy frequencies here, and I'm going to be like, oh, okay, my hotspot is 147.525. That's what I actually use. And I use 293 because it's just easier to do. 147.525. Once again, 293. And now I'm going to go like, wait a minute here. There's only 1, 2, and 911. What the hell? I know I put those talk groups in there. This comes back down into the system thing here, where we're going to click on system and like, oh, wait a minute. My ham ones were in the ham thing here. So now I'm going to go back over to zone, going to go edit my zone. And now I'm changing the drop down from main down to ham. Now I'm going to close this. Now look what I have. TG1, 300, and statewide. Okay? So in this one here, what I'm going to go ahead and do, I'm going to call this local. Okay? And with my local one, I'm just going to go into my local hotspot on TG1, and that's it. Now I have my frequency 147.525, my NAC code of 293, and I'm going to transmit on talk group 1. But now let's say I'm using a repeater, okay? And let's say I want to have those multi-talk groups in there, but I don't want to create multiple channels. So now we can go here and we could say multi again, and I'm going to call this one multi-talk group this time. And let's say I'm going to go into the repeater. So I'm going to go into repeater on 147.855. And then the NAC code actually for this one is going to go ahead and be 355. And then I'm going to come out on 147.255. And then once again, the NAC code for this one is going to be 355. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and leave it as talk group 1 right now, but I'm going to have list selectable. And now what I can do is now that I have this multi-TG, well, here, we'll call it multi-repeater TG. Here, let's try it. Sometimes, you know, the wording is restrictive. There we go. Multi-RPTG. It's just whatever. It's a name. You name it whatever you want. Now what's going to happen with this multi-repeater talk group, I know that I can program a button on the front of my radio, and now what I would be able to do is I can go talk group 1, 300, or 1000. So that's how you have it set up from there. So once again, kind of a cool and interesting aspect of how to program the P25s. You could do this also too if you wanted to have like a hotspot. So if I wanted to, I can come back here and I'll change this to hotspot, okay? And now what I do is I can do the same thing, put list selectable. Now this is my frequency, this is my NAC code, this is my frequency, this is my NAC code. My talk group now is list selectable. So now I go into my hotspot on 1, or I could select and go into a regional talk group on the hotspot, or statewide talk group on the hotspot. So that's kind of how you kind of program it for the radio on there. Once you get this all programmed up, you can read it into the radio. And as you see here, here's channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So those are all going to be your channel selector knobs that are on there. Once you get past channel 7, it's going to beep, you know, all that kind of stuff because it's not being used on there. So that is the programming of the P25 talk groups on there. I know it seems like a lot. I know it seems kind of weird and stuff like that on there. But in all reality, it's not really that weird. It's not really that difficult to do. Once again, you just have to create some basis of foundation. You have to know what frequency you're going to go ahead and use. Then you have to know what the network code is, the network access code. The NAC code is going to go ahead and be to use on that frequency. Okay? I always suggest running a NAC code of some sort. And the reason being is that you'd be surprised at, even though it's an digital channel, sometimes you can program them for mixed mode, which you kind of saw on there. There was the ability to do mixed mode where the radio is sitting here and going, hi, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing? I'm listening for analog. I'm listening for digital. I'm listening for analog. Listening for digital. Oh, I hear analog. I'm going to do that. Oh, I hear digital. Not that common. They call it mixed mode. P25 realm on that is usually mixed mode. But you have to set it up, because if you don't, what it's going to go ahead and do is it might wake up to the noise on there. Alrighty? It might. So always use always use a NAC code, and then talk groups can be used in a similar fashion. Once again, talk groups are really used for separation of the groups of people that need to talk together on a frequency. NAC code is used to be able to have access to that frequency. And I wanted to go ahead and stress that, because that was, like I said, one of the questions, or some of the questions that went along and came up. But you know what it is time for? It is time for, you know what really bends my antenna? You know what really bends my antenna? As we talked about programming tonight, is really kind of being able to, as I stated in the beginning, is to make sure you get the right type of software and you go ahead and you use the right type of cables. Don't cheap out. Don't buy a $200, $300, $400, $1,000 radio and then be like, oh, I can't afford the programming cable or the software. Okay? Don't do that. I hear that so many times. People will be like, I found this really great P25 radio, Motorola, E.F. Johnson, Kenwood, Tate, Harris, whatever. I found this really great radio, blah, blah, blah. And then they go ahead and be like, oh man, shit, I got to buy a programming cable. Is there anybody who knows where I can get a $25 programming cable for it? Guess what? It's probably not a $25 programming cable. It's probably a $50, $60, $70, maybe even a $100 programming cable. And the software is going to go ahead and be inexpensive too. Use the right software, use the right cable, or you are going to have problems with your radio. More so, you're dealing with a very expensive radio, okay? You're dealing with a very expensive radio here that does things. Do it the right way and you'll be thankful. And you will be really thankful because guess what's going to happen is when you're doing it the right way, it's the right cable, it's the right software, you're not going to have any programming issues. When you don't have the right software, when you don't have the right programming cable, the radio's not going to read, or when you try to write to it, it's going to brick. More importantly, don't buy not buy because it's not buy, but don't use things like Chirp or some sort of hacker whacker kind of programming software. That kind of stuff will damage your radio and will brick your radio, folks. And I don't know about you, but P25 radios are a little more expensive than a cheaper Chinese DMR radio, right? If you want to use some hack software with that, go ahead. And then you're out $50, $70, right? Whatever. Okay? But if you're paying $200, $300, $400, $500, $600, $700, $800, $1,000 for one of the radios, you could take the cost and bear it of going ahead and having an actual genuine programming cable and the software. As stated, buy the software. Okay? I will tell you this day and age, the radio companies are getting smart. Back in the day, you used to buy the software and it's like, oh yeah, hey, I got this radio here, and it was an analog radio by whatever big radio company. Oh, here's the disc. Take it. If you need to program it there. That kind of thing. Da-da-da-da-da. I was guilty of that my tunes and everything. But now with newer software, it is actually hard-coded to your computer. So when you buy the software, you download the software and install it on your computer, it can only be on that one computer. Because when you go ahead and you enter the serial number key or whatever to it, it reads what your hard drive is or a number on your hard drive on there and says, I can only work on this, because then it reports back up. You take the software, you try to put it on another computer, it's going to be like, forget it, ain't going to work. Ain't going to work whatsoever. So definitely, and by all means, make sure you go ahead and use the proper software on there. That's all I could say about it, and it bends my antenna when people don't do that. I've had so many people that have talked to me and said, guess what? I think I bricked my radio. If you know what the term bricked your radio means, it basically means that it's saying, hey, something went wrong when I was either trying to program or firmware update the radio and something bad happened. It stopped working. Okay? The flip side of the coin is people will go ahead and if you know what bricking means, you know that bricking really activates a hidden mode that we jokingly call it the FedEx paperweight mode. Meaning that when you brick your radio, you can't program it, you can't usually read it, you can't write it, it doesn't work no more, you turn on, it doesn't work, and it can now sit on your desk as a paperweight until you take it via FedEx and send it back to the manufacturer. So do that for me. Don't do that. Other mode of cheap software and stuff like that, you're going to thank me. Also, when you're looking at buying P25 radios, be very careful. Make sure that the radio is still able to be supported and you still can get software for the radio. As time is going on, a lot of the first and second generation of P25 radios are out there really cheap. I know a great score of, wow, $100 for a P25 radio is great, but then you find out you can't get the programming cables for it no more, or you can't get the software, and now you just kind of got screwed out of your money. And it's easy to separate a fool from their money. And that's what is on this week's, it really bends my antenna. So thank you very much for tuning in to this episode of Communications and Cigars. Once again, as I always say, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you understand it, that, kind of programming it on there. In my opinion, out of all the digital modes out there that are not amateur based, so as we're talking P25, Next Gen, DMR, P25 is super simple in my opinion to do. Next Gen is sort of the second sort of simple one on there, and the only reason Next Gen is very similar to P25, but it's not as popular. And DMR is the hard one, right? DMR, not only do you need to know frequency, you need to know color code, you need to know time slot, and you need to know talk group. P25 is not that way. You need to know frequency, NAC, and talk group. 3 little simple things on there. So until then, everybody, I want everybody to take care, stay safe. Remember, go in and vote. Message on the board here saying, in the video here saying, nah, keep it at Monday nights at 8 p.m. Or, yeah, release a video once a week. We understand you're busy, John. Or if you don't want to do it, go ahead and once again, email me, communications-cigars@jjkcom.com. Or if you're on social media and follow us on social media, go on and submit the poll answer there. So until then, everybody, I want everybody to take care, stay safe, and if you have a nice, delicious cigar, enjoy the weather and enjoy it there. Take care, everyone.